What do the MCU, Star Wars, Harry Potter, J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, and Jesus have in common? Well, I have Dr. Frank Turek and Dr. Bobby Conway here to connect the dots. Hello, thinking Christians. If you wish to deepen your Christian faith and learn how to defend the Christian faith, you are in the right place. Welcome to the Unapologetic show, where we defend truth without compromise with Dr. Bobby Conway, the One Minute Apologist. I'm your host, Tim Hall. Today, we have the pleasure of having Dr. Frank Turek with us, and we're going to be talking specifically about his new book called Hollywood Heroes. And before we get too far, Frank, you mentioned that there's a special for anyone that's interested in this book. If they purchase it before May 3rd, you said?
That's right.
The audio version is included with that. So you want to make sure that you head on over to HollywoodHeroes.com.
HollywoodHeroesBook.com.
HollywoodHeroesBook.com and check that out as soon as possible. So we're gonna dive in here. So this is gonna be a fun conversation. Just the action movie, these heroes, the superhero movies, they have dominated the top 25 movies of all time. So why do you think that superhero movies have so much of a connection with us? Why are we so connected to these movies?
Because we want to be taken out of this world of pain, suffering, and the idea that we know something is beyond this world of decay, of pain and suffering and trouble. We all want to be taken out of it. We want someone to come in and take us to the promised land, and that's what these superheroes do. Yet these superheroes also point to the ultimate hero, Jesus. That's why we call the book Hollywood Heroes, How Your Favorite Movies Reveal God. When you look at some of these characters, whether it's Iron Man, whether it's Captain America, Batman, Wonder Woman, on and on and on, these different heroes in these movies, they're pointing to the ultimate hero, and they're also pointing to the fact that these heroes take us from this world of decay, pain, and suffering to a place where we all want to go, and that's ultimately going to be a place where there's no pain, suffering. That's what Jesus does. He takes us to heaven ultimately.
Yeah. You know, Frank, when I think about you, I think it's really cool that you're doing this book, Hollywood Heroes. What got you into this? I mean, I know you've done this book with your son. You've written this with your son. Have you always liked the Marvel movies, or is this something that your son's like, hey, Dad, come on, you got to get...
Well, my son is the movie buff. My son, when he saw the second trilogy of Star Wars, he was 11. I saw the first trilogy, I was 15. When the first Star Wars movie came out, he was 11. He went to see Phantom Menace. And then he got so into it that he would read all the books in the Star Wars sort of subculture. Yeah. There's, hundreds of these books about Star Wars that you can read. And he would read those. And then, of course, he got into Harry Potter. He got into the Marvel series. He got into all that. And so he's the real movie buff, Bobby. Yeah. And so 4 or 5 years ago, we're just sitting around talking. And I said, there's so many elements in these movies that can help us teach good theology, good apologetics, good biblical life lessons. Why don't we try and put together a book? And since he knew the movie so well, he was the perfect guy to do it with. He's also a graduate of Southern Evangelical Seminary, even though he's been in the Air Force since he graduated college. He did that going to seminary while he was in the Air Force. So he's still in the Air Force. He's an intelligence officer. But we took 4 or 5 years and on and off wrote this book. So now it's just coming out May 3rd.
Well, let's get a little bit controversial here. One of the characters in the book that you highlight is Harry Potter.
Right.
And we know that Christians are often they pull back from pop culture a little bit. So there's been some controversy, especially with movies like Harry Potter. How do you address that controversy, and how do you connect the Harry Potter story in the book?
Well, we point out, number one, that it's up to parents what let their kids watch, obviously. Every parent, should watch what their kids watch closely. And I understand why people didn't want the occult kind of things in Harry Potter in the Christian home, at least initially. However, I don't find that same kind of concern for, say, Lord of the Rings. And Gandalf is a wizard, right? And Chronicles of Narnia, even the C.S. Lewis, there's wizardry in there. There's the occult in those movies as well. And so if we can't watch anything that has any evil in it, we couldn't even read the Bible, by the way. There's evil throughout the Bible, right? And no good story is, or let me put it another way, good stories always have good versus evil in them. Yeah. Otherwise, we wouldn't be interested. You know, if you started a movie and saying, and they lived happily ever after, none of us would be interested in it. So there's a tension that comes with all of these movies. And to go to Lucas says they're all morality plays. George Lucas says that's what the whole Star Wars series is. It's a big morality play, and so is the Harry Potter series. Now, J.K. Rowling is British, as you all know. She says the whole series can be epitomized by two Bible verses, which you find in the movies. One is from 1 Corinthians 15 about death being destroyed, and the other is from the Sermon on the Mount where Jesus says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be. Yeah. Right. And she says all the movies can be epitomized by those two Bible verses. Now, it turns out that Harry Potter has more in common with Jesus than virtually any other character we cover in the book. Number one, he's prophesied, just like Jesus is, to arrive, to be a Messiah. Number two, he has to act morally to achieve what he needs to achieve to be the Messiah. Number three, he dies for his friends. And then number four, he rises from the dead to protect them. Well, that's what Jesus does, right? He's prophesied. Yeah. He has to live a moral life. He dies and he resurrects to save his people. That's what Harry Potter does. Yeah. And she says, these are British books. You would expect people to see these kinds of themes come through a book from a British writer. She said, but I never wanted to talk about it because I didn't want people to know where we were going, you know, in the books. Yeah. And through the movies. So there's a lot of parallels from Harry Potter to Jesus. And we point out, of course, the ultimate hero is Jesus. All these different movie characters are just pointing to the ultimate hero.
Yeah, and that's why I think this is where worldview training is so important. And that's what this book is it really teaches people how to have a biblical worldview. When my kids were young, it seemed like anytime we would finish a movie, we'd walk out and I would say, where does this movie align with our biblical worldview? And where is it out of alignment? We're trying to teach our kids to think Christianly. We're not trying to stick their head in the sand.
Right. Yeah, that's what we try and do in the book, Hollywood Heroes. We say, enjoy the movies, but then talk about them. We have a list of questions at the end of each chapter so you can dialogue with your kids or anyone that's interested in these movies, right? I mean, there are people that'll never darken the door of a church, but they'll watch Harry Potter and you go, well, do you know that Harry Potter has the same characteristics that Jesus has in real life? I mean, Harry Potter saves the wizard, the wizard world of J.K. Rowling. Yeah. Jesus saves the real world that you and I are in. Right?
That's right. You want the real world or the fake world?
Right. Well, let's transition to another British author, kind of pair of authors here. So J.R.R. Tolkien, author of Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit series, he convinced another author, C.S. Lewis, who's famous for the Narnia series and again several other books, that Christianity was the true myth. So we've been kind of dancing around some of this. What do you mean by the true myth?
Well, Lewis was always enthralled with stories about dying and rising gods, and he was very enthralled with these kinds of stories. And then Tolkien pointed out to him, because they were friends, they were in a group called the Inklings, where they would get together and they'd be authors and they'd talk about what they're writing about, and Tolkien was part of that. Of course, Lewis was. And at one point, Tolkien turned to Lewis and said, Jack, because that's what they called him, Jack, why are you so enthralled with all these dying and rising God myths, but not Christianity? It seems like you're not interested in that at all. And he basically said to Lewis, he said, Christianity is the true myth. All these other myths you're reading about are fake, but they're pointing to the real story, the true myth. Christianity is actually true. Jesus died and rose again. And it was like a light bulb went off in Lewis's head. And as you know, he spent the rest of his career basically writing why Christianity was true. Yeah. So the true myth is Christianity. It actually happened.
If you're somebody trying to figure out what it is that you believe, consider reading Mere Christianity. Yeah.
It's funny, too. In the book, we cover how Lewis and Tolkien had no tolerance for materialism. Because, if we're just determined to believe what we believe, why would we believe anything we think is true? It's a self-defeating. And the atheists, they think we're all moist robots, right. So why should we believe what we believe? We shouldn't. They're defeating their very ability to think. And I don't know have you guys seen Max McLean's new movie?
Yeah, I did, yes.
Yeah, it's great. It's called Most Reluctant Convert. And they depict when Lewis learns that materialism makes thinking impossible. And he was a materialist at the time, from one of his friends. They depicted it in the movie this way. Lewis is walking down some stairs and he goes, I can't believe I've never seen this before. Why didn't I see that determinism is self-defeating? He said, I now believed in spirit. I didn't believe in God because I didn't want him to be a nuisance. Right. Right.
It's a great sequence.
A nuisance. Because you see, God's going to tell me how to live, and I don't want him to tell me how to live.
Right,
so I didn't want God to be a nuisance. Can't we just believe in spirit?
And then he would learn you can't customize your own version of God.
Right. Exactly. Well, again, man, this is a fascinating conversation because, as a family, like I said, we watched the Star Wars movies. My 11-year-old and my wife have been reading the Harry Potter, so we kind of reading a book and then we watched the movie. And one of the other movies that we've just finished up watching is we did a marathon of the Lord of the Rings movies, and we've tried to again connect some of those dots, and we did that with the Narnia series as well. So they read the books, and then we talked about some of the Christian influences with that. But one thing that I thought was interesting about your book that you brought out is, why did Tolkien pick the hobbits to play the hero in Lord of the Rings? Help unpack that for us.
Well, because I think, and my son says this too, that when you see Tolkien picking weak characters to be heroes, that's where his true Christianity shines. Because you look throughout the Bible people, the people that are heroes in the Bible, are all weak. I mean, David's weak. He's just a shepherd boy. Moses is weak. He's a stutterer. He's a murderer. God picks him anyway. Paul is against the Christian faith completely, and he has issues, obviously, and yet God picks him. Matthew's a tax collector. Everybody hates him, yet God picks him. Mark can't even complete a missionary journey, to the point where Paul's all upset with him, yet he gets with Peter and he writes a gospel. It's weakness after weakness. Peter, is he supposed to be the leader, right? He denies Christ 3 times. He runs away at the crucifixion. I mean, he has to be dope slapped by Paul later in the book of Galatians. I mean, he's just a weak guy, yet God uses the weak. So when Tolkien is using hobbits to save the world, he's basically pointing out that we're going to save the world through weakness and yielding to God rather than by power of arms. And even Gandalf in the series Lord of the Rings says, we're not going to win this by power of arms. We're going to win it in another way.
Yeah, you think about like a Nick Vujicic and how he has been used by God. No hands, or no arms, no legs, no worries. I think he wrote a book with that title.
Right.
And it's just incredible. I mean, talk about weakness, or you think about Helen Keller. There are people that are out there right now and they feel like, man, how can I make a contribution? And in America, we value, success, and we value, corporate,
climbing the corporate ladder.
Yeah, climbing the corporate ladder. But Jesus comes along and, he takes the weak things and he meets us with his power there. And I think that's incredibly encouraging.
That's why Paul says, when I'm weak, I am strong, because when I'm weak, I'm going to depend on God. I'm not just going to depend on my own power. And the hobbits have to depend on everybody else to get the ring to Mordor, right? They've got to depend on Gandalf to strategize it. They got to depend on Aragorn to bring the forces of Mordor out, all the orcs, because, they think, oh, well, Aragorn must have the ring, right? So they're going to use the ring to try and defeat us. So we're going to go take out Aragorn and all of his soldiers. Meanwhile, Sam and Frodo are able to cross Mordor without being in any way stopped by these orcs, because all the orcs are trying to fight Aragorn. And yet, even when they get, when Frodo gets to the volcano, all he needs to do is drop the ring in, and then human nature takes over, and he goes, "The ring is mine!"
Right. Yeah.
Right. And then, of course, Gollum shows up, "My precious," right?
Precious.
He wants to take it back, and there's so much in there that there are biblical life lessons. There's theology in there and that's what we uncover in Hollywood Heroes.
Let's talk about Batman and Superman. How how do you address Batman and Superman in the book?
Well, actually, there's a movie, Batman versus Superman, which a lot of people didn't like. Why is Batman fighting Superman?
Right.
That doesn't seem to make any
They're
sense.
both good guys,
yeah,
right?
they're both good guys. Why are they fighting one another? Well, it turns out there's a villain, as we know, Lex Luthor, and he wants to pit Batman against Superman because he thinks Superman is a bad god. Superman should be taking care of this world, and he's not. In fact, Lex Luthor is really upset that Superman didn't intervene to save him, Lex Luthor, from his abusive father. And God should step in. And so what Lex Luthor does in this movie, Batman versus Superman, is he utters, which is a perennial question. If there's a good God and he's all powerful, why does evil exist? He utters, this goes back to Epicurus and the Greeks, right? And so he actually states this in the movie. And he basically calls Superman a bad god. That's why he wants to have Batman try and kill him. Okay? Now, here's the interesting thing about all this. Do you notice that Lex Luthor is upset that God hasn't stopped or didn't stop his father from abusing him? But you notice that Lex Luthor is not upset that God doesn't get involved to stop Lex Luthor from doing evil to other people?
Yeah.
Wow, that's really a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's true of us, isn't it?
Yep.
We're always saying, God, why don't you stop evil? Why don't you stop him? Why don't you stop her?
Yep.
We never say, God, why don't you stop me? Look, if God were to stop evil at midnight tonight, would any of us still be alive at 12:01?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't be.
Right. Yeah,
Because we do evil every day. So God allows evil because he allows free will, and free will is the only way we can have love. That's one of the reasons he allows evil to occur, because without allowing evil, he can't allow love, and he wants love to exist. So we cover all this in the chapter on Batman in the Hollywood Heroes book. So I just think it's one of the best movies to reveal the answer to the "if God, why is there evil?" question than any of the movies we look at.
Yeah, and that's the way to watch a movie right there. I mean, you pull away, you're entertained. At the same token, you think Christianly, and you come out and you're able to give an illustration. And for those that are teachers or parents and they want to be able to connect God's truth to people's heart, starting with illustrations is a great way to do it. I mean, Jesus used illustrations all the time, dealing with his surroundings in order to drive a truth home. And that's what you're doing in Hollywood Heroes.
Yep. Thanks.
Excellent. How do you compare to Hollywood Heroes? What is unique about Jesus specifically?
Oh, wow. Well, if that's the last chapter, the Ultimate Hero, chapter 8. After we go through Captain America, Iron Man, Harry Potter, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Batman, and Wonder Woman, we get to the Ultimate Hero. And we say, if you could add up all the positive qualities of all these characters, would you have Jesus? No. You'd have somebody closer to Jesus, but not completely. And I think one of the characteristics of Jesus that we highlight in that chapter is something that I think shows his perfection, that if you look at these kind of qualities in people, very few people have these qualities. What am I talking about? You've probably heard that weaknesses are just strengths pushed to an extreme. Like, for example, if you're task-oriented, that's a strength, right? But it can also be a weakness. Why? Because it may cause you to roll over people without paying any attention to them, right? And so your weakness is just a strength pushed to an extreme. You don't see that in Jesus. Like, for example, here are some of the things that we bring out, that Jesus is full of truth, but also grace, right? He's 100% truth and 100% grace at the same time. Jesus is full of holiness, but he's also approachable. He's not like holier than thou. You can't approach me. He's also supremely approachable. He's strong, but he's also tender. I don't see these qualities existing in any other person in history or even people I know now, right? He's confident, but he's also humble. He's completely mission focused, but he's also loving. Now, do you know anybody that has all those qualities? Maybe there might be somebody that holds one or two of those in tension well. But I don't know of anybody that holds them all well, right? 100% truth, 100% grace, 100% holiness, 100% approachability, 100% strength, 100% tender, 100% confident, 100% humble, 100% completely mission focused, but also loving at the same time. I don't see anybody doing that.
Yeah. So talk to us a little bit here in our few remaining minutes about some practical uses that you would like to see this book take on.
Well, I think it can be used particularly with parents or grandparents and their kids or grandkids. It can also be just used with anybody that's interested in movies. You could do movie nights, right, with people, small groups, Bible studies, that kind of thing. Watch these movies and then we'll talk about it. Or, this week we're going to watch this movie. Next week we're going to talk about it. However you want to do it, right? We have a full movie list in there. Although there are people who have read the book, like Natasha Crane. She's a friend of mine and Bobby's, and she's part of our teaching team at the Cross-Examine Instructor Academy. She had only seen one movie out of the 20 or so we recommend seeing. She goes, I still track with the book. I still like the book. So because we describe what's happening in the book. But there are life lessons that can be brought out, not just the fact that all these superheroes point to the ultimate hero, Jesus, but let me give you one big life lesson that I think is really good if we've got a minute, and that is, one of the biggest life lessons that I think needs to be taught to people is we need to show them that they're not supposed to follow their heart. They're supposed to guard their heart, okay? Because Proverbs 4:28 or 4:23 says, above all else, guard your heart because everything you do flows from it. Well, Tony Stark is the perfect example of that. He actually has a device planted in his chest that's designed to guard his heart from encroaching shrapnel. Yeah. Right. Now, we unpack what all this means in the book, but that's one of the life lessons that it's visual. You can see it. Guard your heart, Tony.
So good.
Yeah, that's excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to reading this book. I'm looking forward to diving into more of these conversations with my family as we continue to watch some of these movies. I think we're on movie 4 or 5 of Harry Potter and on book maybe 5 or 6 or so. So I'm looking forward to continuing on this journey and reading this book with my family. Bobby, any final thoughts or words here?
Well, I just want to encourage people to get Hollywood Heroes. Frank is a great friend, a very gifted, internationally recognized apologist. You've probably have heard of his book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, or Legislating Morality, or Stealing from God. And now this comes out. And I think this is an opportunity to not only talk to your kids about truth that matters, but to have a bunch of movie nights together, because at the beginning of the book, they lay out the different movies that they're going to discuss. So if you're looking for family nights for the next umpteen weeks, you've got a plan. Go get some popcorn, watch a movie, and then have a spiritual conversation around Hollywood Heroes.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode of the Unapologetic Show, and we look forward to meeting you next time.